Welcome, Detective Geathers.
When we left off, Detective Shiela Geathers had begun to fear that Ronald Mercer's murder was not an isolated act of violence. Ronald had been killed during a family gathering in Cunningham Park. He was a husband, a father, and a man whose life appeared completely ordinary. Yet investigators quickly discovered that someone had been watching him long before his death. His routines were predictable. His activities were publicly visible. His habits could be learned by anyone patient enough to pay attention. Then a second victim appeared. Martin Reeve was found dead inside his residence less than 48 hours later. Different neighborhood, different profession, different life. Yet the similarities were impossible to ignore. Both men appeared to have been carefully selected. Both crimes demonstrated planning rather than impulse. Both victims had lived highly visible lives, sharing routines and personal details that allowed strangers to understand where they would be and when they would be there. What Detective Geathers is about to reveal tonight is how forensic evidence began connecting the murders, how experts determined the same offender was likely responsible, and how the appearance of a third victim transformed a troubling theory into a terrifying certainty. Detective, tell the audience what investigators learned from the second murder scene.
When I entered Martin Reeve's residence, I immediately recognized similarities to the Cunningham Park investigation. Although the settings were completely different, both scenes reflected preparation. The offender appeared to have selected a favorable opportunity, carried out the attack efficiently, and left behind remarkably little evidence. The medical examiner's findings became critical during this stage of the investigation. While the victims died in different environments, the forensic characteristics suggested a common offender. The injuries demonstrated precision. There was no evidence of a prolonged struggle. There was no indication that either victim had anticipated what was about to happen. The medical examiner concluded that both victims were attacked suddenly and decisively, leaving little opportunity for meaningful resistance. That observation mattered. It suggested the offender was not relying on physical dominance or emotional confrontation. Instead, he appeared to be relying on preparation, timing, and surprise. At approximately the same time, ballistic specialists began comparing evidence recovered from both investigations. Their analysis revealed several important similarities. While investigators remained cautious about drawing conclusions too early, the experts believed the crimes shared enough forensic characteristics to justify treating them as potentially connected. The ballistics team explained that offenders often reveal themselves through consistency. Choice of weapon, choice of location, choice of engagement distance, choice of timing. Each decision creates a behavioral signature that may not identify a suspect directly, but can reveal whether investigators are pursuing one offender or several. In this case, the similarities were becoming difficult to ignore. The more evidence we gathered, the more the murders appeared connected. The next phase of the investigation focused heavily on victimology. Detectives reconstructed every aspect of Ronald Mercer's and Martin Reeve's lives. Financial records, employment histories, family relationships, travel patterns, digital activity. The goal was simple: find the connection. Initially, we found none. The men had never met. They did not share employers. They did not belong to the same organizations. They did not live in the same neighborhoods. They did not travel in the same social circles. The lack of connection frustrated investigators. Then, we stopped looking at who they were. We started looking at how they lived. That decision changed everything. Both men maintained active social media profiles. Both routinely documented their activities. Both shared schedules, locations, and future plans. Neither man believed he was doing anything unusual. In reality, both men had unknowingly created roadmaps of their lives. The killer didn't appear to be selecting victims based on identity. He appeared to be selecting them based on accessibility. That realization transformed the investigation. At approximately the same time, Detectives developed their first major suspect. His name was Garrett Sloan. Garrett had a documented history of online harassment. Several complaints alleged obsessive behavior, threatening communications, and inappropriate monitoring of strangers through social media platforms. More importantly, investigators discovered that Garrett had interacted with both victims online. The connection immediately attracted attention. Garrett knew who the victims were. Garrett had access to information about their routines. Garrett had a history of troubling behavior. For a period of time, Garrett became a significant focus of the investigation. Yet another name emerged almost simultaneously. Terrence Walker. Terrence worked as a freelance journalist and community reporter. His profession placed him in constant contact with public events, neighborhood activities, and online discussions. He spent much of his time reviewing community forums and social media content. Investigators learned that Terrence had attended public gatherings involving both victims months before their deaths. The connection was weaker than Garrett's, but it existed. Unlike Garrett, Terrence attracted almost no attention. Unlike Garrett, he appeared calm, professional, and unremarkable. At this stage, both men remained viable suspects. Neither could be excluded, neither could be charged. The investigation continued. Then the third victim was discovered. His name was Michael Harper. Michael was 45 years old, a high school teacher, husband, and father of 2 daughters. Like Ronald Mercer and Martin Reeve, he maintained predictable routines and shared aspects of his daily life publicly. The discovery of Michael's death marked a turning point. 3 victims, 3 separate locations, 3 lives that appeared unrelated, yet the similarities were undeniable. The medical examiner conducted a comparative review of all 3 cases and identified consistent behavioral patterns suggesting a common offender. Ballistic specialists reached a similar conclusion after reviewing evidence from each scene. The findings did not identify a suspect, but they strengthened the theory that one individual was responsible. The investigation intensified immediately. Detectives now believed they were dealing with a serial offender. That belief became even stronger when surveillance analysts discovered recurring vehicle sightings near locations relevant to the investigation. The footage was incomplete and inconclusive, but investigators now possessed additional evidence suggesting the murders were part of a coordinated pattern rather than isolated acts.
Detective, by this point investigators had 3 victims, 2 significant suspects, growing forensic evidence, and increasing confidence that one offender was responsible. Did you believe you were finally getting close to identifying him?
No. If anything, I believed we were only beginning to understand how carefully he planned. The more evidence we uncovered, the more disciplined he appeared. He selected opportunities. He studied routines. He avoided unnecessary risks. Most importantly, he remained invisible. That realization was deeply unsettling, because offenders who act impulsively eventually make obvious mistakes. Offenders who plan carefully often don't. Then the investigation received a phone call. It came from a nurse working at an urgent care center. At first, the information seemed insignificant. The nurse described a patient she had treated several days earlier. She remembered him because something about the encounter felt unusual. After watching news coverage of the murders, she found herself unable to stop thinking about the visit. She couldn't explain why. She only knew the memory kept returning. The information she provided was not evidence, not yet. But it pointed investigators toward a possibility we had not fully considered. And once we began exploring that possibility, the entire investigation started moving in a very different direction.
Detective, what was it about that nurse's memory that convinced you the answer might be hiding in a place investigators had not yet examined?
Because for the first time, someone wasn't describing a victim. Someone was describing a man who might have crossed paths with the killer himself. And if that memory proved accurate, we were about to learn that the person responsible for 3 murders had come much closer to exposure than he ever realized.